The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was thick with the kind of tension that usually precedes a political detonation. The air conditioning hummed, but it did little to cool the atmosphere as Representative Ilhan Omar leaned into her microphone, her voice sharp with indignation. She was not there to answer questions. She was there to prosecute. And Senator Kennedy, you and your colleagues have pushed policies that would have kept my family out of this country. Omar's voice rang through the room, cutting through the murmurs of staffers and the clicking of camera shutters. She pointed a manicured finger directly at Kennedy, who sat 4 seats down from Chairman Grassley. Kennedy watched her with an expression of patient curiosity, his fingers steepled in front of him, motionless. Your rhetoric about vetting refugees, about extreme vetting, about treating people fleeing war zones as security threats? That kind of language has real consequences, Omar continued, gathering momentum. You don't understand what it's like to flee persecution, to spend years in a refugee camp, to watch your family suffer. She paused for effect, her burgundy hijab catching the television lights as she scanned the Republican members of the committee, daring them to interrupt. And then, to come to a country that promised refuge, promised safety, promised opportunity, only to be treated as suspicious, as less than, as a threat. Kennedy still hadn't moved. He looked like a man listening to a sermon he'd heard before, waiting politely for the benediction. I am tired, Omar declared, her voice dropping to a register of exhausted righteousness. Tired of having my patriotism questioned, of having my loyalty questioned, of being told that because I am Muslim, because I am black, because I am an immigrant, that somehow I have divided loyalties. Several Democratic senators nodded in performative solemnity. There was scattered applause from the gallery, activists who had come to see their champion speak truth to power. Chairman Grassley's gavel silenced it with a sharp crack. Representative Omar, thank you for that testimony, Grassley said, his voice dry. We'll proceed to questions. Senator Kennedy. Kennedy leaned forward, activating his microphone. His Louisiana accent rolled out, thick and warm, wrapping the room in a deceptive blanket of Southern gentility. Ms. Omar, I appreciate your passion. I surely do. And I want you to know I heard what you said about your family's refugee experience. Omar's expression softened slightly. Perhaps she expected a concession, an apology, or at least a defensiveness she could exploit. But since you're here, Kennedy continued, his tone shifting imperceptibly, and since you've raised questions about loyalty and vetting, I hope you won't mind if I ask you just a few questions to clear up some things. He picked up a document from the stack in front of him, a stack that was notably thick, tabbed, and organized. Let's start with your marriages. The softening in Omar's face vanished instantly, replaced by a hard, guarded mask. That's my personal life, Senator. Well, yes, ma'am. Normally, I'd agree, Kennedy said, peering over his reading glasses. But see, there are some public records that have raised questions. Just want to give you a chance to explain. He put on his glasses, examining the document as if seeing it for the first time, though everyone in the room, especially Omar, sensed he had memorized every line. According to Minnesota state records, in 2002, when you were 19 years old, you married a gentleman named Ahmed Hirsi. Is that correct? That was a religious marriage, Senator. Not a legal marriage, Omar replied quickly, her answer rehearsed. I understand, Kennedy nodded. So, you and Mr. Hirsi had a religious ceremony, a Muslim ceremony, but didn't file any legal paperwork with the state, and then you had 2 children together. Is that right? Yes. And then, in 2008, you and Mr. Hirsi separated. Got what you've described as a religious divorce. Still no legal documents filed because there was no legal marriage. Do I have that right? Yes, Omar said, her voice clipped and wary. She was waiting for the trap, but Kennedy was taking his time building it. Okay, now here's where I get a little confused, Kennedy said, looking up with an expression of genuine puzzlement. In 2009, you legally married a different man, a British citizen named Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi. That marriage was filed with Hennepin County, legal and official. Is that correct? Yes, Senator. And we separated in 2011. Separated? Yes. But you didn't get legally divorced until 2017, 6 years later. Is that also correct? That's correct. Kennedy nodded slowly, processing the timeline for the audience. So, just to make sure I understand the timeline, you are legally married to Mr. Elmi from 2009 to 2017, but you separated from him in 2011. He consulted another document, his finger tracing a line. And then, in June of 2012, you had a third child. Is that right? Yes. And that child's father was Ahmed Hirsi, your first husband, the one you had the religious marriage with. Silence hung in the room. The air conditioning seemed suddenly loud. Omar stared at Kennedy, her eyes narrowing. Ms. Omar, is that child's father Ahmed Hirsi? Yes. The room had gone completely quiet. Even the press photographers had stopped moving, sensing the shift from biography to indictment. Kennedy removed his reading glasses and set them on the table. His voice remained gentle, conversational, but now the steel underneath was unmistakable. So you were sleeping with Mr. Hirsi and having his baby while you were legally married to Mr. Elmi. Kennedy paused, letting the implication land. Now, I'm not a fancy lawyer. Well, actually, I am a lawyer. I was Attorney General of Louisiana. But that sounds an awful lot like bigamy to me. Or at the very least, it's what my mama would have called complicated. Senator, that's offensive. I'm not done yet, ma'am. Kennedy's tone hadn't changed, still friendly, but it was clear he wouldn't be interrupted. Because here's what's really interesting. In 2014 and 2015, while you were legally married to Mr. Elmi, you filed joint tax returns with Mr. Hirsi. Federal tax returns. He held up 2 more documents, waving them slightly. Now, the IRS is real particular about this. You can only file joint returns if you're legally married. But you weren't legally married to Mr. Hirsi. You were legally married to Mr. Elmi. Kennedy leaned forward. So, either you committed tax fraud by filing false joint returns, or you committed bigamy by being married to both men at the same time. Which is it? Omar's face had gone pale. Senator, this is a witch hunt. No, ma'am, Kennedy replied, his voice flat. These are public records. Tax filings, marriage certificates, divorce papers, all filed with government agencies. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. The first trap had snapped shut. The framing of racism was crumbling under the weight of bureaucratic documentation. But Kennedy was not finished with the marriage records. He picked up another document, preparing to ask the question that would shatter the hearing completely. Kennedy had established the financial and legal contradictions of Omar's marriages, the tax fraud or bigamy dilemma. Now, he moved to the perjury trap, using her own sworn statements against her. The no-contact perjury trap. And here's another puzzling thing, Kennedy said, picking up a divorce filing. When you finally filed for divorce from Mr. Elmi in 2017, you submitted an application to the Minnesota court. You signed it under oath. He emphasized the legal gravity. Under oath. In that document, you stated that you had not had any contact with Ahmed Elmi since June 2011, that you didn't know where he was, that you believed he was in London, but you couldn't reach him. Kennedy looked over his glasses. Do you remember signing that document? I don't recall the specific. Well, Let me help you remember, Kennedy interrupted gently. He pulled out a series of photographs printed on large cardstock. These photos were posted on your Instagram account in 2015. He held them up for the cameras. That's 4 years after you claimed you lost contact with Mr. Elmi. And unless my eyes are failing me, that's you in London. And that's a man identified as Ahmed Elmi, standing right next to you, smiling for the camera. He spread the photos across the table. So either you lied under oath when you said you had no contact with him since 2011, which would be perjury, or you have a very strange definition of no contact. Omar opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The visual evidence, her own social media, contradicted her sworn legal affidavit. The explosive question. Kennedy leaned back, folding his arms. Ms. Omar, you came here today to lecture this committee about immigration fraud and vetting and loyalty. And I'm sure you'll understand why some of us have a few questions about your own immigration history, your marriage history, and your truthfulness under oath. He glanced at the clock. I've got about 4 minutes left. So, let me ask you one simple question, and I'd appreciate a simple answer. The room went deadly silent. Is Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi your brother? The room exploded. The chairman's gavel hammered down, 3 times, 4 times, trying to quell the chaos. Shouts erupted from the gallery. Omar's face contorted in fury. When the noise finally subsided, Omar hissed into the microphone. Senator Kennedy, that question is disgusting. It is based on racist conspiracy theories promoted by right-wing websites. I will not dignify it with a response. Kennedy nodded amiably, unperturbed. I understand you think it's disgusting, ma'am, but it's actually just a question. A yes or no question. Is Ahmed Nur Saeed Elmi your brother? I have answered this question repeatedly. The answer is no. The evidence of siblinghood. Actually, ma'am, what you've said is that the allegations are absurd and offensive. What you haven't done is provide any documentation to prove they're false. Kennedy pulled out more documents, laying the groundwork for the suspicion. See, here's what's got folks confused. Ahmed Elmi is listed as being 3 years younger than you. You've said publicly you're the youngest of 7 children, but his birth date on your marriage certificate would make him younger than you, which is odd if he's not your sibling. Senator, I am not going to... And both of you attended North Dakota State University. Both lived in Minnesota. In fact, according to public records, at one point, you, Mr. Elmi, and Mr. Hersey were all using the same address in Minneapolis. All 3 of you living in the same apartment. Kennedy paused, letting the bizarre domestic arrangement sink in. Now, I don't know about you, ma'am, but most people don't live with their husband and their ex-husband at the same time. He leaned forward, delivering the implication clearly. Unless Mr. Elmi wasn't actually your husband at all. Unless he was your brother, and you married him to help him get immigration benefits. That is a vile accusation. It's a question, ma'am, and it's a question you could answer real easily, Kennedy countered. You could release your immigration records. You could authorize your family members to speak to investigators. Your father could clear this up. Your siblings could clear this up. There's allegedly even a DNA report floating around that would settle this once and for all. But you won't do any of that. You won't release the records. You won't let your family speak. You won't submit to DNA testing. Why? Because I don't have to prove anything to conspiracy theorists and racists. Ma'am, I'm a United States Senator conducting oversight of immigration fraud. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's my job. Kennedy concluded the segment by quoting the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. The search of records could neither conclusively confirm nor rebut the allegation that he is Omar's sibling. They couldn't confirm it, but they couldn't rule it out either. Kennedy noted, because you won't cooperate, and that makes people wonder what you're hiding. The perjury trap had been laid, the brother question asked, and the refusal to provide DNA evidence placed on the record. Kennedy prepared to pivot from past immigration fraud to present-day campaign finance corruption. Kennedy yielded his time, allowing Democratic senators to throw softball questions that let Omar regain her footing. But an hour later, his second round of questioning began. He shifted from the past, immigration fraud, to the present, the channeling of millions of campaign dollars to her romantic partner. The $2.9 million boyfriend, Ms. Omar. I want to talk about your current husband, Tim Minot, Kennedy began. Omar looked wary. What does my husband have to do with immigration fraud? Well, we'll get to that. But first, let's establish the timeline. You and Mr. Minot got married in March 2020. Before that, he was working as a political consultant. His firm was called the E Street Group. Is that right? Yes. His firm provided services to my campaign. Services? Yes. Let's talk about those services. Kennedy pulled out a thick folder of Federal Election Commission, FEC, records. According to FEC records from 2018 through 2020, your campaign paid the E Street Group approximately $2.9 million. Kennedy let the number hang there. $2.9 million, ma'am. And according to an analysis by the Washington Free Beacon, that represented 78% of the E Street Group's total revenue during that period. 78%. He summarized the dependency. Essentially, your campaign was Mr. Minot's entire business. The affair and the payouts. Kennedy then connected the money to the romance. And those payments made up 56% of your campaign's total expenditures. More than half your campaign spending went to your boyfriend's firm, because he was your boyfriend at the time, wasn't he? Senator, the services were legitimate. I didn't ask if they were legitimate. I asked if he was your boyfriend. Kennedy read from the divorce filing of Beth Minot, Tim's wife at the time. The parties physically separated on or about April 7, 2019, when defendant told plaintiff that he was romantically involved with and in love with another woman, Ilhan Omar. So, in April 2019, Mr. Minot told his wife he was having an affair with you. Is that correct? I'm not going to discuss someone else's divorce. Fair enough. But let's look at what happened next. Kennedy tracked the money flow. After Mr. Minot confessed the affair in April 2019, your campaign's payments to his firm increased dramatically. In fact, in the 8 months following his confession, your campaign paid his firm over $1 million. Kennedy laid out the scheme clearly. So, let me make sure I understand this. You're having an affair with a married man. Your campaign is paying his firm millions of dollars. Money donated by working Americans. His wife finds out about the affair and divorces him. You divorce your husband. And then you marry Mr. Minot, who has now received nearly $3 million from your campaign. He paused. Does that seem appropriate to you? The cover-up attempts. When Omar claimed the FEC found no violations, Kennedy corrected her with the specific complaint regarding travel reimbursements. The complaint stated that these payments were deliberately obscured to hide the fact that you two were having an affair. The FEC ordered your campaign to amend its filings. He also cited the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board investigation, which found she used campaign funds for personal travel. It was a violation of campaign finance law. Kennedy removed his glasses, adopting the persona of a disappointed schoolteacher. But here's what really interests me. He was about to pivot to the aftermath, the sudden closure of the firm and the mysterious appearance of millions in a new, opaque venture. Kennedy moved from the funneling of campaign cash to the suspicious and sudden accumulation of wealth by Omar's husband, raising questions of national security and foreign influence. The sudden pivot. After you married Mr. Minot in 2020, after all this controversy about campaign payments, he suddenly gets out of the political consulting business, Kennedy noted. The E Street Group closes down, and Mr. Minot starts a new venture capital firm called Rose Lake Capital. My husband is entitled to pursue his business interests. Oh, I agree. But here's the interesting part. Kennedy consulted his notes, referencing court documents from South Dakota. Rose Lake Capital had $42.24 in its bank account in early 2024. $42. He looked up, delivering the shock. But then, by the end of 2024, according to your own financial disclosure forms filed with the House of Representatives, Rose Lake Capital was worth between $5 million and $25 million. That's quite a growth rate, isn't it? From $42 to $25 million in less than a year. The opaque origins Kennedy pressed on the nature of this sudden wealth. Ms. Omar, do you know what Rose Lake Capital does? It's a venture capital management firm. Yes, but what does it actually do? Who are its clients? What investments has it made? Where did that money come from? Omar remained silent. Because here's what's curious, Kennedy continued. The firm's website says it has extensive international ties and expertise in diplomacy, legislation, and politics. But it won't say who its clients are. It won't say where it invests. It's completely opaque. The national security threat. Kennedy connected the dots to her official duties. You're a member of Congress. You sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. You have access to classified information. You have influence over U.S. foreign policy. And your husband runs a mysterious venture capital firm with international ties that won't disclose its clients or its investments. He leaned forward. Does that concern you at all? My husband's firm is entirely legal. I didn't ask if it was legal. I asked if it concerned you. Kennedy summarized the optics. Let me tell you how this looks from Louisiana. Ma'am, it looks like you funneled almost $3 million in campaign funds to your boyfriend. Then you married him. Then he shut down the consulting firm and started a new firm that mysteriously became worth millions of dollars. And this firm has foreign connections, but won't say what those connections are. You came here today to lecture us about corruption. But it seems to me you're running a family business using campaign funds, and your husband is now worth millions through a company nobody can explain. The loyalty question reframed. As his time wound down, Kennedy circled back to Omar's opening complaint about loyalty. One more thing. You mentioned earlier that you were tired of questions about your loyalty. I want to address that because I think it's important. Kennedy's voice became serious. I don't question your loyalty because you're Muslim. I question your loyalty because of your actions. He listed the actions: immigration fraud, funneling campaign money, enriching her family. This isn't about your religion, Ms. Omar. This is about your conduct, and hiding behind accusations of Islamophobia doesn't change the facts. The room was silent as Kennedy yielded back. He had dismantled the victim narrative by replacing it with a narrative of corruption and financial exploitation. Now, he prepared to address her most infamous statement regarding 9/11. By the third round of questioning, Omar had retreated into evasive answers. But Kennedy was relentless. He shifted to the defining moment of her public rhetoric, her description of the September 11th attacks. The Some People quote, Ms. Omar, I want to talk about September 11th, 2001, Kennedy began. Omar's expression guarded immediately. Kennedy pulled out the transcript of her March 2019 speech at a Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, event. You said, and I quote, CAIR was founded after 9/11 because they recognized that some people did something and that all of us were starting to lose access to our civil liberties. Kennedy looked up. Some people did something. That's how you described September 11th. Is that correct? Senator, that quote has been taken completely out of context. I've read the entire speech, ma'am, multiple times. The context doesn't help. The reality of the attack. Kennedy dismantled the minimization with the brutal reality of the day. You described the worst terrorist attack in American history, an attack that killed 2,977 people as some people did something. Kennedy listed the specifics: 19 Islamic terrorists, 4 planes, the Pentagon, Shanksville, the Twin Towers, firefighters running into burning buildings, people who had to choose between burning to death or jumping 100 stories. He paused, letting the horror fill the room. And you called it, some people did something. Senator, I was discussing the civil liberties implications. No, ma'am. You were minimizing a terrorist attack. Some people did something, is what you say, when someone ate your leftovers from the office refrigerator. It's not what you say about the deliberate mass murder of American citizens. The victims' confrontation. Kennedy introduced Nicholas Harros, Jr., whose 76-year-old mother, Frances, was killed in the attacks. Kennedy recounted Harros's appearance at Ground Zero on the 18th anniversary. He wore a T-shirt, and on that T-shirt were your words, "Some people did something." Kennedy read Harros's direct address to Omar from the transcript. Madam, objectively speaking, we know who and what was done. There is no uncertainty about that. Why your confusion? Kennedy looked directly at Omar. He was talking to you, Ms. Omar, asking you why you couldn't clearly state what happened on 9/11. Why you had to minimize it. The refusal to apologize. Senator, I have mourned the victims of 9/11. Have you? Because you never apologized for that statement, Kennedy countered. You apologized for your anti-Semitic tweets, but you never apologized to the families of 9/11 victims. He pointed out her response to the backlash, claiming victimhood. Your response was to claim you were the victim. You said these criticisms endangered your life. Kennedy leaned forward. Ms. Omar, 3,000 Americans died, and you can't even bring yourself to clearly condemn the attack without qualifications, without pivoting to talk about civil liberties, without minimizing what happened. The narrative of victimhood. I have condemned terrorism. Then why did you describe 9/11 as some people did something? Kennedy asked. I'll tell you why. Because you don't think you did anything wrong. You think the real tragedy of 9/11 is how it made Muslims feel uncomfortable, not the 3,000 people who died. He concluded the segment by challenging her understanding of national security. You don't understand that 9/11 was an attack on America. And the fact that you can't say that clearly tells me everything I need to know about where your sympathies lie. Kennedy yielded back, having exposed her prioritization of narrative over national tragedy. The next round would focus on her pattern of anti-Semitism. Kennedy began his 4th round of questioning by setting up a visual aid, posters of Omar's own tweets. The focus was her documented history of anti-Semitic rhetoric, dismantling her defense that these were mere policy criticisms. Hypnotize the world. Kennedy pointed to the first poster, a 2012 tweet. Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. That was anti-Semitic, wasn't it? Kennedy asked. I have apologized for that tweet. Yes, you have. After you got caught. After people pointed out that saying Jews hypnotize the world is a classic anti-Semitic trope going back centuries. The idea that Jews use mystical powers to deceive people. All about the Benjamins. He moved to the next poster. It's all about the Benjamin's baby, tweeted in February 2019 regarding AIPAC. That's a reference to $100 bills, isn't it? You were saying that support for Israel is bought with money. I was criticizing AIPAC's lobbying. No, ma'am. You were using another anti-Semitic trope, the idea that Jews use money to control governments. The dual loyalty charge. Kennedy pointed to the third statement from a March 2019 town hall. I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. You were questioning the loyalty of American Jews, Kennedy stated flatly. That's the dual loyalty trope. It's the same accusation that's been used against Jews in every country they've ever lived in. The same accusation that was used to justify the Holocaust. Condemned by her own party, Kennedy emphasized that this wasn't a partisan attack. He read the joint statement from Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, and Jim Clyburn. Anti-Semitism must be called out, confronted, and condemned, whenever it is encountered without exception. Your own party condemned you, not Republicans, your own Democratic colleagues. He cited Eliot Engel and Nita Lowey, Jewish colleagues Omar had attacked, accusing Lowey of having foreign allegiance. You doubled down. You accused a Jewish congresswoman of having foreign allegiance simply because she supported Israel. The pattern of mistakes. You had to apologize 3 times, Ms. Omar. 3 separate apologies, and each time you said you were learning. Kennedy leaned forward. How many times do you get to claim ignorance? At what point does a pattern of anti-Semitic statements stop being innocent mistakes and start being actual anti-Semitism? When Omar invoked her Jewish friends, Kennedy cited the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Committee, and the Simon Wiesenthal Center, all of whom condemned her words. These aren't right-wing organizations. These are the leading Jewish civil rights groups in America. The 0.2% minority Kennedy delivered a powerful contextual argument. Ms. Omar, there are 15 million Jews in the world, less than 0.2% of the global population. And in virtually every generation, someone has tried to blame them for something. And those accusations always lead to violence, pogroms, expulsions, ultimately genocide. 6 million Jews murdered in the Holocaust, and it started with exactly the kind of rhetoric you've been spreading. He concluded the segment by contrasting her lecture on Islamophobia with her actions. You lecture Republicans about hate, but you're the one spreading hate. You're the one trafficking in ancient prejudices. Kennedy checked the clock. He had one final devastating topic to address: her loyalty oath. Kennedy opened the final line of questioning, focusing on a specific speech Omar gave in Minneapolis on January 27, 2024. This segment addressed the core issue of allegiance, contrasting her sworn oath to the U.S. Constitution with her public declarations to the Somali community. The Somalia First speech. Kennedy confirmed Omar's presence at the Hyatt Regency Hotel and the language of the speech, Somali. He then played the video, verified by 3 independent court-certified interpreters. The subtitles appeared on screen. We are people of brotherhood, people of blood. As long as I am in Congress, no one will take Somalia's sea. Sleep in comfort, knowing I am here to protect the interests of Somalia from inside the U.S. system. Kennedy paused the video. Did you say that, Ms. Omar? Senator, as I've explained, that translation is... I'm not asking about the translation. I'm asking about what you said. Did you tell a room full of Somalis that you're in Congress to protect Somalia's interests from inside the U.S. system? The conflict of interest. No, ma'am. You said you were there to protect Somalia's interests. Not American interests, not your constituents' interests. Somalia's interests. Kennedy played more of the video. The U.S. government will do what we tell the U.S. government to do. It's a country where one of your own sits in Congress. Kennedy isolated the phrase, one of your own. You were identifying yourself as Somali, not American. Is that correct? I am both Somali and American, but which comes first? Kennedy snapped. Because in that speech, you never mentioned America. You never mentioned your oath to the Constitution. You talked about Somalia. He cited the reaction of Rhoda Elmi, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for Somaliland, who criticized the speech as unbecoming and lacking common decency. That's a foreign diplomat criticizing a member of the U.S. Congress for prioritizing Somalia over America. The violation of the oath. Kennedy walked to the front of the table, emphasizing the gravity of the oaths Omar had taken. Naturalization oath. You swore to renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. Congressional oath. You swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Explain to me how giving a speech in Somali, promising to protect Somalia's interests from inside the U.S. system, is consistent with those oaths. You know what that sounds like to me? It sounds like you think of yourself as Somalia's representative in Congress, like America is just a convenient platform for advancing Somalia's agenda. Sleeping in comfort. Kennedy tied this back to her lecture on dual loyalty. You said it was anti-Semitic to question whether American Jews are loyal to Israel. But here you are, declaring that you're in Congress to protect Somalia's interests. So, which is it, Ms. Omar? Is questioning someone's loyalty to America always wrong? Or is it only wrong when we question your loyalty? He quoted her phrase, sleep in comfort. Who's sleeping comfortable about America, Ms. Omar? Who's sleeping comfortable knowing that a member of Congress with access to classified information thinks her primary loyalty is to Somalia? I have never said my primary loyalty. You didn't have to say it. You showed it. You showed it in that speech. You showed it when you married someone who might be your brother. You showed it when you attacked Israel. You showed it when you minimized 9/11. Kennedy stood up. Ms. Omar, you're not a victim. You're being questioned because of your conduct, because of your statements, because of your priorities. He gathered his documents, preparing for the final indictment. Kennedy moved to the formal conclusion of the hearing, summarizing the overwhelming case he had built against Ilhan Omar. He transformed the specific allegations into a broader narrative of betrayal of the American immigrant story. The need for vetting. You came to this hearing to lecture us about immigration fraud and vetting, Kennedy began, gathering his posters and documents. But what you've shown us today is exactly why we need strong vetting. He articulated the core danger. Because we don't want people who come to this country only to use it as a platform for advancing foreign interests. We don't want people who take an oath to the Constitution while keeping their fingers crossed behind their back. The betrayal of the dream. Kennedy looked directly at Omar, delivering the moral verdict. America gave you refuge. America gave you opportunity. America gave you a path to citizenship and ultimately to Congress. And how did you repay that? Kennedy listed the charges one final time. Possibly committing immigration fraud, enriching your family with campaign funds, spreading anti-Semitism, minimizing 9/11, declaring that you're here to protect Somalia, not America. His voice dropped, becoming quieter but more intense. You're not the future of the Democratic Party, Ms. Omar. You're a cautionary tale. The official motions. Kennedy picked up one final document to formalize the consequences. Mr. Chairman, I move that this committee refer Representative Omar's testimony to the Department of Justice for investigation of potential perjury, immigration fraud, tax fraud, and campaign finance violations. I further move that we refer this matter to the House Ethics Committee for investigation of whether Representative Omar has violated her oath of office and whether she remains fit to serve in Congress. I also move that we request a full audit of Rose Lake Capital and its foreign connections. Chairman Grassley banged his gavel. The motions are noted and will be taken under consideration. Ms. Omar, you are excused. The final confrontation. As Omar stood to leave, flanked by lawyers, her face a mask of fury, Kennedy spoke one last time. Ms. Omar, I want you to know something. This isn't personal. This is about the truth. He delivered the final, crushing comparison. You had every advantage America could offer. You could have been a symbol of what makes this country great. But instead, you've become a symbol of betrayal, of ingratitude, of corruption. He paused, referencing her infamous quote. Some people did something. That's what you said about 9/11. Well, Ms. Omar, some person did something today. Some person came before this committee and showed us exactly who she is, and all of us, all Americans, we're going to remember that. Omar walked out without looking back. The hearing was over, but the political consequences were just beginning. The immediate aftermath of the hearing was explosive. Kennedy's methodical dismantling of Omar resonated across the political spectrum, breaking through the usual partisan defenses. The viral explosion. The room erupted into chaos, the narrator noted. The C-SPAN video of the hearing hit 50 million views within 24 hours and 94 million by the end of the week. The sheer volume of evidence Kennedy presented, the marriage certificates, the photos, the speech transcripts, made it impossible for the mainstream media to dismiss the event as a simple Republican attack. The Minnesota Star-Tribune ran an in-depth investigation that confirmed Kennedy's facts. Their conclusion: Kennedy had accurately represented the facts. The Democratic silence. The most telling reaction was the silence from Omar's own party. Nancy Pelosi wouldn't comment. Chuck Schumer wouldn't comment. Even the Squad offered only tepid defenses. The evidence of financial impropriety and the video of the Somalia First speech had made Omar toxic. The investigations begin. 2 weeks later, the consequences became official. The Department of Justice opened investigations into potential immigration fraud, tax fraud, and perjury. The House Ethics Committee launched its own inquiry. 3 weeks later, under pressure from vulnerable moderates, Democratic leadership quietly removed Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. The primary challenger in Minnesota. The political ground shifted. A primary challenger emerged. Abdi Warsame, a Somali-American Marine Corps veteran who served 2 tours in Afghanistan. His campaign struck the perfect contrast. His first ad featured him in uniform, reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I am American first, he declared. I serve this country. I bled for this country, and I will always put America first. The ad went viral, offering Somali Americans a patriotic alternative to Omar's divisive rhetoric. The financial collapse. The financial empire Kennedy had exposed crumbled. Rose Lake Capital's website went dark. Tim Minett declined all interviews. The opaque money machine had been exposed to the light, and it withered immediately. The stage was set for the final reckoning in Minneapolis. The fallout from Washington reached Minneapolis 3 weeks later. Omar returned to her district, expecting the usual supportive crowd, but found a constituency that had been awakened by the hearing. The constituents' turn at a town hall, Omar faced a room full of angry voters. The questions were no longer about policy. They were about the specific allegations Kennedy had raised. Why didn't you tell us about the tax returns? Why did you give your husband's company $3 million? Did you marry your brother? Omar attempted her standard defense, calling it a witch hunt, accusing critics of racism. But this time, it didn't work. The evidence was too public, the numbers too specific. The Somali veteran. The turning point of the town hall, and perhaps her career, came when an elderly Somali man stood up. He was a veteran, wearing his cap, a man who had come to America as a refugee in the 90s. "Ms. Omar," he said, his accent thick but clear, "I came to this country with nothing, just like you. I was grateful. I served in the army. I raised my children to be Americans." He paused, his voice breaking. "But you came here, and you used America. You took advantage of America. You betrayed America." He delivered the judgment of her own community. "And you made all of us look bad. All Somali Americans, all Muslim Americans. You made people think we're all like you." He shook his head. "You shame us. You shame your family. You shame our community." The exit. The room erupted in applause, not for Omar, but for the veteran. Omar tried to respond, but her words were drowned out. She left the town hall early, rushed to her car by security as protesters chanted outside. The hashtag #, fraud from Somalia, trended for 3 days. The narrative had shifted permanently. It was no longer Republicans versus Omar. It was patriots versus the betrayer. The immunity provided by identity politics had been shattered by the testimony of a fellow Somali immigrant who valued his American oath. The final chapter chronicles the political end of Ilhan Omar and the lasting impact of Senator Kennedy's interrogation. The election defeat. In the Democratic primary 6 months later, Abdi Warsame defeated Ilhan Omar by 12 points. Warsame's victory speech was gracious but firm. "I don't hate Representative Omar, but I'm grateful that the voters of this district have decided they want someone who will put America first. Someone who understands that being an American is an honor, not an opportunity for exploitation." The crowd chanted, "USA! USA!" a sound rarely heard at Omar's rallies. The disappearance. Omar released a statement claiming she was leaving politics to spend more time with family, ignoring the crushing defeat. She never addressed the marriage timeline, the immigration records, or the campaign funds. She simply disappeared from public life, her political career extinguished by the weight of the evidence. The Kennedy interview. Senator Kennedy, in an interview with Fox News, reflected on the hearing. "I don't enjoy exposing people, but Ms. Omar came to that hearing to lecture us, and I thought the American people deserved to know who was doing the lecturing." He articulated the core message. The American people are tired of being told they're racist for wanting strong borders, and they're real tired of being told they're wrong to expect their representatives to put America first. He contrasted Omar's American nightmare of exploitation with the true American dream of service. Some people did something terrible, and those people need to be held accountable. That's all we did at that hearing. The 9/11 vindication. 1 year later, a reporter tracked down Nicholas Harros Jr., the 9/11 victim's son. Asked if he felt vindicated, he looked at a photo of his mother. "Vindicated? No. My mother is still gone." But he added, "I'm glad people finally saw who she was. I'm glad they finally understood that some people did something wasn't just a poorly worded phrase. It was a window into how she really felt about America." He praised Kennedy. Senator Kennedy did what needed to be done. He asked the questions everyone was afraid to ask. My mother would have liked him. She didn't suffer fools. Harros pointed to the Freedom Tower. That's America. People like Ilhan Omar? They'll never understand that. They'll never understand what it means to be American. It's about the values you uphold. The final lesson. In the Senate, Kennedy kept a copy of the hearing transcript. He would tell visitors, "That's the day we defended America. That's the day we said that being an American means something." He would smile his folksy smile. Some people did something. Turned out that something was telling the truth. And the truth set a lot of people free.